Hello, my name is Rick Willis. I'm a local realtor here in the greater Charleston area. I help people buy houses. The information you're about to hear was recorded from a live call-in talk radio show here in the greater Charleston area called the Rick Willis Real Estate Show. It's information that you must have if you're going to be buying a home. And specifically, it talks about different clauses and items in a sales purchase contract. You've got to have this information. I know you'll benefit from it. Please enjoy.
I'm going to devote today's show to walking you through a purchase agreement. Now, for anybody listening that is looking to buy, anyone listening that has a son or daughter, friend, neighbor, relative, business associate that's looking to buy, make sure you send them a text, send them an email, make a phone call to them, and make sure they tune into this show, because you're going to hear some subtle intricacies of the buying process that you won't hear in very many other places. So we're going to walk you through a purchase contract, making some comments about things you may not know in terms of signing a contract. First of all, let me say that when you're buying either new construction or resale, there's something called disclosure of brokerage relationship, meaning you either are a customer or you are a client. You go out to a new home development, the builder has a representative, and that builder representative has a fiduciary obligation to do everything in the best interest of the builder. You go out and you walk in an open house, you call on an ad, or you see something online and you contact the listing agent. That individual is representing the seller. So I highly recommend all of you that are listening, if you're going to be buying either new construction or resale, you absolutely, unquestionably want to have your own buyer's agent who has a written agreement to represent your self-serving best interest as opposed to the seller's best interest. You wouldn't go to court and have the other person have their own attorney and you not have your own attorney. In effect, having a buyer's agent is like going to court and you have your own attorney. And the good news is you do not pay them. A buyer's agent receives a portion of the real estate commission that a seller or builder has previously agreed to pay in what is called a co-op situation with the listing company. So you can have your own buyer's agent representing you without paying for it. And by the way, you always want somebody very, very, very experienced in buyer representation looking out for you. Finished here today, you just might want to contact me about being your buyer's agent or somebody that you know, because I know how to represent your self-serving best interest and negotiate on your behalf, whether it's a builder or a resale property. So you want to have your own agency agreement established as a buyer's agent. And in order to do that, you need to have a document, a written document signed that says that you want to be in a client relationship, not a customer relationship. That's step one about what you want to know. Then when you see a property that you like, having already established that you have a written relationship with someone to be your buyer's agent, that person is going to do a lot of things on your behalf. And I'm holding in my hands an 8-page contract. It says agreement/contract to buy and sell residential real estate. And I'm going to go through this in detail, all 8 pages with you, off with the buyer's name and the seller's name. Well, what happens if you're married and your spouse is out of town and you see a property that you like? Does that mean that you can't buy it till they get back in town? Well, folks, we're in an electronic world today, so things can be done electronically even without faxing or emailing. There's things called e-signatures and DocuSigns and things, so You can even put as a buyer here and or assigns, where you have the right to assign the contract to another person or entity of your choice. The key is when you see the right property, go to contract immediately, and I'll be talking more about why that's so essential in just a minute.
We met Rick about 20 years ago. We had a house in Charleston. We let him list the house and we sold it at a very good price about 2 weeks later. So we were real happy with that service, and we've been with him ever since.
We've been friends now for 20 years, probably through the purchase or sale of 5 or 6 different properties.
And I highly recommend Rick and Charlene.
Purchase price, boy. Probably the single biggest thing that a buyer is concerned about is, what should I offer? Well, folks, that really goes down to how bad do you want it, combined with how unique is the property, combined with what is your financial situation. What should you offer? There are times, folks, when you want to offer less than the asking price, when it's not worth it to you, or when they have dramatically overpriced it, which your buyer's agent can let you know. So there are times when you make a low offer. There are other times, however, folks, that you should be offering the full asking price. You see, if you're going to get financing, there's going to be a third-party appraisal done. And we're in a marketplace today that is not kind to people that like to make low offers. Obviously, if you're an investor and you have no emotional attachment to the property at all, you're not going to live there. Different story. I'm speaking now about if, in fact, you're going to be a homeowner occupant in that respective property. Now, there are 2 times you get to negotiate the price of a purchase contract. One is when you contract for the property. And the other time that you get to negotiate the same property is after you've done an inspection or you've completed some due diligence work and you've checked certain things out, how much money it might take to bring the property up to a certain condition, the cost of any repairs or things that you wouldn't see by just walking through the property. So again, if you find that there are things that you need to spend additional money on, or you just don't feel after you get through the due diligence period that you want to pay that much, you can come back and renegotiate with the seller and says, well, I'll still buy the property, but I'm not willing to pay you this price. I'm willing to pay you this price, and here's the reason. So again, 2 times to renegotiate a contract. So you can offer less than full price, and there are times you can and should be offering over the asking price. Yes, there are homes and properties that are underpriced by the listing agent, folks. They're underpriced. They're worth more. The listing agent and or the seller blew it when they arrived at the purchase price, or the list price, I should say. And you might say, well, why would I want to pay more? Answer, so you get it. You see, it's not uncommon when a property is unique, special, which could be by way of location or features or upgrades, that there will be multiple offers on that respective property. And again, assuming it's worth it to you, and again, knowing it probably will have an appraisal if it's not an all-cash offer, there's times and places to offer over the asking price. Folks, you want a good buyer's agent representing you that you don't pay, that can advise you whether to offer less, equal, or greater than the asking price, and then justify it and show you how that you can get out of the deal if you find after your due diligence or during your due diligence period that you may have either paid too much or you just plain changed your mind. Agent. Personal property is another item that is in the purchase contract. You see, there's real estate, real property, those things that are connected to the house that are real property. And then you've got things like certain appliances. It could be a swing set in the backyard. It could be a shed that is not permanently attached to the backyard. There are certain things that are considered personal property. I recently was negotiating a contract where on the back porch there is a jacuzzi. That's considered personal property, folks. And whether people put it in the listing that it goes with the property or not, you, the buyer, have the right to ask for personal property, even if it's not listed in the listing that it shall convey. And folks, there's times in the past I've gotten people to get the boat that's on the trailer to go with the house. It's amazing the things that you can get. I even had one buyer a number of years ago that said, I'll buy it, but I want this, and this as furniture from inside the home. And again, you want a good buyer's agent that will ask for things on your behalf. And by the way, there's an old saying that says, if you don't ask, you can't receive. You can't get what you don't ask for. And the worst thing that can happen in many cases is the answer is no, you can't have those personal property items. We had a situation recently where somebody didn't want to leave the refrigerator that was in the house, but yet refrigerator was in the contract, and they had another refrigerator in the garage. And they said, no, we'll leave the one in the garage that was new with the house when we bought it, but we're not going to leave our garage, our refrigerator that's in the house. Well, as we speak, that's still being negotiated, folks. You've got to be very careful about what you ask for, and sometimes you need to be very specific about what you ask for. You want a good buyer's agent representing you, folks.
We were very impressed by their experience, their knowledge of the Charleston area. Rick bargained very hard with the agent. I would recommend them to anyone without qualification. The buyer's agent is no cost to the buyer. The seller pays all the fees. And you can't lose by choosing Rick and Charlene Willis as your buyer's agents.
Conveyance. When do you take possession? I've written offers where people close in 10 days. Cash contract. I've written offers, and it's customary that it be somewhere between 30 and 60 days would be a standard time frame. And I've written contracts where the closing date is 3 years from now, and the people are going to do a lease or a pre-occupancy for a number of years before purchasing. There's creativity that can be applied in this business, even if you're not ready today to close on a property. Folks, you want a good buyer's agent. Earnest money deposit. You see, when you are buying a property, you need to put up a deposit. You've got to put up a deposit. That's how it works. It could be $1. Don't recommend it, but it could be. Custom in our area, and it's custom only, not policy or procedure, but custom, is that a deposit would equal 1% of the purchase price. 1% of the purchase price. So you're buying a $300,000 property, that's a $3,000 deposit. And there's people that always want to put down significantly less than that. Folks, let me tell you something. If there's multiple offers on a given property, sometimes the highest deposit wins. Believe it or not, I met a person several years ago that when they were buying a property in downtown Charleston, and this has been years ago now, it was $1 million plus property many years ago in downtown Charleston, and there were multiple people interested in this. And the person that ended up getting the property put as the deposit, are you ready for this? The full asking price. They put up over $1 million deposit. Now, if somebody else put up $10,000, $50,000, or $100,000, and this person put up the full asking price, guess who got the house? What it really says, folks, with the size of your deposit is how serious you are and that you have the financial ability to get to the finish line. So it's got to get put into an escrow account, and it's obviously contingent on you doing inspections, contingent on financing if, in fact, you are financing the property, et cetera, et cetera. So it's in good hands. Then there's a part of a sales contract that says transaction costs. And transaction costs sometimes are referred to as closing costs. You see, when you go out and obtain financing for a property, there's a certain amount of down payment that is required by VA or FHA or USDA or some other conventional type of financing. But also, each type of financing does allow for the seller to pay for all or part of the buyer's transaction costs, which could be things like even paying points or discount points to buy down a lower interest rate, cover appraisals, cover inspections. I mean, there's all kinds of things you can lump into this thing of transaction costs. And it says here in the purchase agreement, buyer's transaction costs includes all costs and closing costs resulting from selected financing, prepaid recurring items, insurance, lender-owned, lender-required flood insurance, discount points, all costs to obtain information from or pertaining to any owners association, et cetera, et cetera. And it itemizes a lot of different things in here. Said differently, folks, it's possible to buy a home for zero cash, no down payment, and no closing costs. Or if you're getting conventional financing, FHA, where there is a requirement of a down payment, it's possible to have the seller pay 100% of your closing costs, or in this case, the language is transaction costs. Folks, you got to have a good, experienced buyer's agent negotiating for you. Your contract, unless you're paying all cash, will be contingent on you obtaining a loan. And there's little spots to check on this contract about a 30-year loan, a 15-year loan, or others. And then what is the minimum and maximum percent down payment that you're going to be putting down, or said differently, borrowing. How many days until you apply for the loan and how many days until it is approved. And folks, the type of financing that you obtain should not be determined between you and just your lender. You have to get an experienced buyer's agent, realtor, who's representing you to participate in the conversation. I know buyers that go online or contact a lender or their bank without involving the buyer's agent that's representing you, and they make mistakes because they don't know what they don't know, that they don't know that they don't know. And I'm referring to both now, the lender as well as you, the individual buyer. Let me give you an example. It's easy to say, okay, I'm not a veteran and I'm not buying where there's USDA, so let me use FHA financing. Why? Because it's only 3.5% down. Well, the problem with FHA as compared to some other types of financing is you're going to get the loan and you're going to have mortgage insurance on the loan for the full 30-year term or whatever length of time you have. You can't remove the mortgage insurance. Where if you put 3% down conventional, 5% down conventional, when you have a certain amount of equity built up in the property, you can remove this thing called mortgage insurance or private mortgage insurance. You want to be able to do that, folks, because you do not know really how long you intend to own that house. Even if you move away, you might choose to convert it to a rental property, and you want to be able to eliminate that mortgage insurance. So whether you're getting VA or FHA or conventional or USDA, there's some creative programs out there, including financing, where you can actually get what is equivalent of a grant or somebody else to put up the down payment for you and or pay part or all of your closing costs for you when you don't think you're qualified to buy any other way. Folks, you want your buyer's agent to be the one that blesses and approves the individual mortgage individual that you work with. It's not about the company. So you don't assume that because the sign is out there that says Wells Fargo, or the sign out there is some other local large lender, that means you're well taken care of. And by the way, this is not a negative statement about those respective companies. I'm just trying to make a point. It's the individual person. You find somebody who's very experienced and works with a company you've never heard of before, but they know all the mortgage loan programs. They know ways around the automated underwriting into a manual underwrited program, ways of looking at you as a self-employed individual and coming up with a different financing outcome than if you went to somebody else who doesn't understand how to evaluate and look at a self-employed individual's tax return or credit report. Folks, trust your buyer's agent to recommend the most experienced person to you to get pre-qualified, to get pre-approved, and actually generate the loan on your behalf.
So we are originally from South Africa. We were born and raised there. I would always use a buyer's agent. We've actually bought 5 properties through Rick and Charlene.
We've had an absolutely brilliant experience with Rick and Charlene Willis, and I highly recommend them to be your buyer's agent.
Right after this interview, we are heading off with Rick and Charlene, and they're going to be showing us a property that they think is going to be our dream home. We look forward to working with them yet again.
Now, most people have heard that you should have a home inspection, and many realtors check the little box here or go out and have a repair procedure or home repair done. But it also says in here that the parties agree upon repair procedures unless a due diligence addendum is agreed upon and part of this contract. And then it goes on to describe the due diligence addendum can create advantages for the buyer by creating a known limited time frame for the buyer to make a decision to buy or not buy, or buy with new terms. Per the due diligence addendum, the seller can receive money when the buyer timely terminates for any reason or no reason. Usually there is no money changing hand. The due diligence addendum covers a broad range of issues, not just repairs and price. The due diligence addendum allows the buyer to consider on-site and off-site issues. Folks, when I represent a buyer, I always do not use this repair procedure language, but we do use the due diligence addendum, which is a way of protecting you, the buyer, better than a repair procedure addendum. So you want your own buyer's agent who's representing you. And then once you get your inspection done during the due diligence period and answer any other questions, verifying schools, foundations, wells, septics, whatever it is you want to do to check the property out, or not the property, but just the area, you can do after the property's taken off the market. And again, the agent representing you can negotiate on your behalf before that due diligence period ends, a reduction in price or concessions or warranties or fixing things up. It is critical that you have an experienced buyer's agent that you do not pay, that's working for you in a fiduciary relationship representing you, the buyer's self-serving best interest. Okay, appraised value. You can either check a little box in a contract that says the contract's contingent on an appraisal or it's not. Guess what most people do? Well, they check the little box that says it's contingent on an appraisal. And, well, if you're not getting a loan, maybe you will check where it says it's not contingent on the appraised value. And you know what? I have investors that have cash, and sometimes they choose to say, I'm not going to make this contract contingent on an appraisal. Well, why would they do such a thing? Answer: they want to make sure they get the property, and they've got the due diligence provision in there, so we can always come back and ask for that later after we check the property out. But typically, the property must appraise. Your loan's going to be contingent on an appraisal. It's a private third-party individual to make sure you're not overpaying for the property, and the seller can rebate the cost to you at closing because that would be considered part of the transaction costs.
Luckily, I knew someone that had used Rick Willis for their real estate transaction. So he referred me to Rick Willis. And sure enough, after about 3 minutes into our phone conversation, Rick put me at ease. It took Rick exactly 3 days to find me a home, and I couldn't be any happier. I highly recommend having a buyer's agent. And when you have a buyer's agent, I highly recommend using Rick Willis and Charlene Willis.
To check the property out, or not the property, but just the area, you can do after the property's taken off the market. And again, the agent representing you can negotiate on your behalf before that due diligence period ends, a reduction in price or concessions or warranties or fixing things up. It is critical that you have an experienced buyer's agent that you do not pay, that's working for you in a fiduciary relationship representing you, the buyer's self-serving best interest. Appraised value. You can either check a little box in a contract that says the contract's contingent on an appraisal or it's not. Guess what most people do? Well, they check the little box that says it's contingent on an appraisal. And, well, if you're not getting a loan, maybe you will check where it says it's not contingent on the appraised value. And you know what? I have investors that have cash, and sometimes they choose to say, I'm not going to make this contract contingent on an appraisal. Well, why would they do such a thing? Answer: they want to make sure they get the property, and they've got the due diligence provision in there. So we can always come back and ask for that later after we check the property out. But typically the property must appraise. Your loan's going to be contingent on an appraisal. It's a private third-party individual to make sure you're not overpaying for the property, and the seller can rebate the cost to you at closing because that would be considered part of the transaction costs. If the property to be sold has been previously occupied, this contract is contingent or not contingent on the buyer or the seller having the property inspected at their expense by a qualified licensed bonded pest control operator selected by, and there's a choice, the buyer or the seller. Well, it's frequently selected by the seller is what is put in here in most cases, but if I'm representing you, the buyer, maybe I want you to select the company or individual to do it, and we'll ask the seller to pay for it. How about that? And again, a little thing, and this is not just termites, folks. It has to do with wood rot. It can do with fungus or percentage of moisture in a property. Other things are included in this. And you want an agent that knows how to read these reports representing you too. A lot of little things, folks. You got to have your own experienced buyer's agent representing you. And remember, you, the buyer, do not pay that individual. It is your job, folks, as a buyer during your due diligence period to check out what is the insurance going to cost. Is there flood insurance required? Etc., etc., etc. Do you want to have a survey done? Not have a survey done? Sometimes you can get what is called a preliminary title exam done to make sure you're not wasting a whole bunch of time on a property that's going to have some title issues later on. That's just a standard part of the contract.
We never do any business with anyone unless it's a personal referral. He kind of represents you like a junkyard dog. Rick really puts his experience to work for you. And if you pick the right buyer's agent, like Rick and Charlene, saving you money, getting you a better deal on the home that you want, that's why I would recommend Rick and Charlene Willis for any real estate transaction.
You see, you can buy a home, folks, that has some issues or potential issues, and we can ask the seller to pay for a warranty. For example, air conditioning unit, providing you have the seller buy the right home warranty program. And folks, there are good and bad and indifferent home warranty companies. Your realtor representing you is going to know which is best. For example, the air conditioner could be on its last legs, but you can get a seller to pay for a warranty that'll either fix it and or have to replace it. And that can be renewed year after year after year after year, and the cost of which could be paid by either the buyer or the seller. But you, generally speaking, would like to have a warranty that'll cover mechanical components in the respective property. Do you know that when a seller puts a property on the market for sale, they have to fill out a multi-page document stating the condition of what they know about the respective property, and in some cases, things about the condominium or the homeowner association, or even some things in and around the neighborhood that might impact that value of the property or the property itself. And the realtor representing you, the buyer, is going to look through that very carefully on your behalf. You got to have the right buyer's agent, folks. Having your own buyer's agent representing you, the buyer, does not cost you any money. When the seller puts a property on the market for sale, they sign an agreement with the listing broker. And that part of that agreement is what that listing broker is going to share as a co-op fee, meaning a portion of the total fee that will be paid to the the buyer's agent that's representing you in the purchase of the property. So although you don't pay the buyer's agent fee, or the realtor fee, if you will, the person representing you is getting paid. There's something in a purchase contract called a lead base paint lead hazard. It's a disclosure. For houses built prior to 1978, folks, they used lead paint. They had lead in the paint. And there's a special document that you need to be aware of and put some initials and signatures on that says you are aware of that. And if there needs to be a special individual or company to check that property out on your behalf, your buyer's agent can help you with that. It says in a very small paragraph in the agreement, but it's important to know, it says that the parties agree that this contract expresses the entire agreement between the parties, that there is no other agreement, oral or otherwise, modifying the terms, and this contract is binding on parties and principals, heirs, personal representatives, successors, and assigns. Illegal provisions are severable, meaning they don't count. I had a situation recently where the seller of the property died between signing of a contract and the closing. And the person said, well, am I still obligated to proceed forward? Answer is yes, because there are heirs to this property. So it's important to know that anything you hear verbally has got to be put in writing. So no matter what a seller says they will do, if it's not in writing, you can't believe it. And again, your buyer's agent is going to be looking out for you to make sure any representation made by anybody on behalf of this property is in writing and a document is signed and or initialed with respective dates. When you go to buy a property, there are things that will adjust to the day of closing. For example, there's property taxes, and that property taxes are paid once a year. And taxes are not paid in advance, they're paid in what is called arrears. So if you buy a property and you close on it in August, a portion of that tax bill is the seller's for that calendar year, and then a portion of the taxes will be the buyer's responsibility. And usually the lenders require that this be paid this year in advance, or a portion of it paid in advance, I should say, so that when the tax bill does come due, that the lender has in escrow enough money to pay the respective real estate taxes. And the same thing is true with a homeowner association or a regime fee. If it's an investment property, the rents are prorated to the day of closing. Security deposits would transfer automatically. Of course, the buyer is going to be getting their own insurance, which would take effect the day of closing. And some properties, they have perhaps a tank of propane, and you have to prorate and divvy up the money of what is due the respective seller for maybe a half a tank, a full tank, whatever portion of that is unused that the buyer will pay for their respective time when they buy it relative to the percentage of fuel that is remaining there.
Came here from California. I was on a contract with Boeing Company.
Rick and Charlene are wonderful to work with. They are just so accommodating, very patient, and they listen.
Rick's an expert on real estate.
We recommend a buyer's agent, and we highly recommend
Rick and Charlene.
Rick and Charlene.
There's a provision in a contract of sale about what happens if somebody defaults. Buyer decides they don't want to buy, seller decides they don't want to sell. There's an opportunity to have mediation and a clause about that. A clause about a broker disclaimer, where basically that the brokers give no warranties or representation of any kind, expressed or implied, as to, and it talks about the broker being off the hook for the condition of the property or schools or zoning, that you, the buyer, are responsible for those items. Important to know that, and that's why you have a due diligence period to check out all of that stuff. And folks, there's all kinds of things that can be written as addendums or things that would modify the existing contract of sale. Pretty much fair game. Anything can be written. Anything can be written in a purchase agreement as an addendum, obviously to be agreed upon by the buyer and the respective seller. Here's a very important part of a contract: notice and delivery. Notice is any unilateral communication. Example: offers, counteroffers, acceptance, termination, requests for better terms, and associated addenda amendments from one party to the other. Notice to or from a broker representing a party is deemed notice to or from the party. Remember now, the realtor is representing you. All notice, consent, approvals, counterparts, and similar actions required under the contract must be in paper or electronic writing and will be effective as of the delivery. Keyword: effective as of the delivery of the notice. In other words, just making a change on an agreement and even initialing it is not valid until there is a delivery to the other respective broker, assuming there are two respective brokers involved.
Well, folks, you've watched my 1/2 hour information video about buying a home. I know you benefited from it, and if you'd like to reach out to me to talk with me about helping you buy a home in the greater Charleston area, you can reach me at 843-327-3017 or email me, rick@rickwillis.com, and certainly visit my website, rickwillis.com.